Grade 11 is our last unit. It's financial applications, and if you take anything away from this course, I would love it to be this unit so that you can be wise money users, money investors, and borrowers. So we're going to talk about interest. There are two ways of calculating interest, and today we're focusing on simple interest. Basically, when you invest your money, you are paid interest for the privilege of borrowing your money. When you borrow money, you are paying interest for the privilege of borrowing. You may have noticed that the interest earned when you loan is a lot less than the interest paid when you borrow. Simple interest, first of all, is not as common, but it is certainly a way of calculating interest if you would borrow from a relative like Uncle Louis. Now, you don't pay back, you get your legs broken. So it's important that we get simple interest and pay it back. Simple interest, by definition, is where only the money invested, let's write the word originally, money originally invested earns interest. You put in $10,000, it's only the $10,000 that earns interest. So like we have done in the past, your interest would be calculated by the amount of money that you have borrowed times the rate, and the time matters. If you borrow it for 10 years, you're going to owe more interest than you would if you borrowed it for 2. So our formula is interest equals principal times rate times time. Principal, spelt like Mrs. Homewood Principal, times rate times time, where your rate is the percent written as a decimal, and your time is in years. Okay, Joe. Joe borrows $5,000 at 8% simple interest for 5 years. Calculate the accumulated interest at the end of the year and write the data in a table. What is the total amount that Joe will pay? And we're going to create a graph. So if Joe only borrowed the $5,000 for 1 year, we would calculate the interest as 5,000 times his rate of interest is 8%. So as a decimal 0.08 for a year, he would owe $400 interest at the end of the year. If instead Joe decides to keep the loan for 2 years, we would calculate $800 interest he now owes. 3 years, $1,200 interest owed. Joe better pay this back. 4 years, $1,600 interest. And finally, he keeps it for 5 years. He ends up with a total of $2,000 interest. Notice our formula calculates interest. His total would be the original loan plus the interest of $2,000. His total is $7,000. Let's graph that. Okay, so if we want to graph accumulated interest, try and write on your side, I dare you. Accumulated interest, so we're not talking about the total. That would shift the whole thing vertically. Notice the language I'm using, upwards by $5,000. We're just going to do the accumulated interest, and it depends on how many years. 0 years, you have 0 interest. Let's skip 2, 3, 4, 5. You could spread it a little more if you wanted on your graph. That's fine. 400, 800, 1200, 1600, and 2000. If he keeps the loan for 0 years, 0 interest, that doesn't happen. $400 interest after a year, 800 after 2 years, and so on. Gosh, it looks like a line. So you know I have perfectly straight drawing. I'll just draw that line in for you. All right, good for me. So it is linear growth when it's simple interest. The interest is merely added to the original principal, the $5,000. Here we have a chart of simple interest. We want to find the little bits and pieces that are missing. So for the first one, we are looking to find the interest. And our formula is principal times rate times time. We have those three things. $350 borrowed at 8%. It needs to be as a decimal, and we need our time in years. So if we're given time in months, we have to convert it to years. There are 12 months in a year, so I would just write it like that. When I type it into my calculator, I will get $18.67. Be sure that's reasonable. Is it reasonable to earn $18? It's not even a full year, but you've got a decent interest rate of 8%. Yep, reasonable. And you also want to round to 2 decimal places always when we're talking about money. The second one, again, we have the principal, $8,000. The rate is 12%, so decimal 12, 65 days. We're going to go with 65 out of 365 days. We don't do the quarter. 8,000 times 0.12 times 65 3/65, $17, and it's decimal 0.95, so we would round that to 10 cents. For the next, we are given the interest and we are asked to find the principal. Oops. I can do numbers, but I can't do letters apparently. All right, the third one. We are given an interest of $55. We want to find the principal. The rate is 9.5%, so decimal 0.95. You feel very silly if you get the decimal in the wrong place. 4 months out of 12 months. To get P by itself, our principal, I am going to divide the left side, both sides, by decimal 0.95 and by 4/12. That will leave me with $1,736.84. Make sure you and your calculator are good friends. The next one, we're given the interest again, $130. I want to find my principal. The rate is 10%, and my time is 6 months. So you can write 6/12, a half, 0.5, whatever, floats your boat. And we get a principal of 130 divided by the 0.10 and the 6/12. We have a principal of $2,600. Think, is that reasonable? We earned a fair bit of interest in a half a year, but we had a good rate. We must have had a decent amount invested as well. The next two. We have our interest is $40, earned on $700 invested. We don't know the rate. The time is 9 months. Same idea, we're doing a division to get the rate by itself. 40 divided by the 700 and the 9/12. It will leave us a rate of, Remember, it will give it to us as a decimal. I have decimal 0.76, which I will write as a percent, 7.6%. The next one, I also have the interest on the principal, $6,500. I want the rate, and I have the time as 3 months. Lots of division going on. 300 divided by the 6,500 and the 3/12. Our rate is decimal 1846 approximately. If you're having a little trouble getting to the same decimal places, sometimes it's easier to do 300 divided by 6,500, hit equals, and then divide that answer by 3/12. Sometimes that can help your calculator a little bit. Decimal 1846, I'm going to write as a percent, 18.5%. And the last two. The last two were given the interest, $2.50 from an $80 loan, 6%, and we want to know the time, but we're going to want to know it in days, which could be a little bit tricky. Let's solve for t, remembering that t will be in years. So $2.50 divided by 80 times decimal 0.6 will give us our time approximately decimal 52083. I'm writing a few down because that's in years. So think reasonably, we've got a little over half of a year. To get our answer in days, we will do the decimal times 365 days in a year. We will have our answer as 190. 190 days. The last one. Also, we have our interest rate on a $6,000 loan at 12%, which is a good rate. So the time might not be huge. Let's solve for t, remembering that t will be in years. 450 divided by both the 6,000 and the decimal 12. We will end up with a t in years of decimal 625. Now my calculator gave me some grief there, but I had to think about reasonable solution. I want some days, so I'm going to convert my years, so that's about 8 months times 365 days. Time is about 228 days. Okay, my recorder conked out on me. I don't know where it stopped recording. I'm kind of hoping it's about right here. So if not, I'll record the whole thing over again. But I'm going to assume that we didn't do the last question together or the next page. So from here, the last thing we want to fill out on this chart is the number of days it would take you to earn $450 on a $6,000 loan at 12%. So we have the interest, the principal $6,000, and the rate is 12%. We want to find the time, and we want to find the time in days. So as we did in the last example, to get time by itself in years, we divide both sides by the 6,000 and by the 12, and we get an approximate rate, time of 0.625. Converting that to days, I take my years, multiply by 365 days in a year, and I will get approximately 228 days. All right, next question. Courtney is our motorcycle mama, and she has an Uncle Louis. She is borrowing $24,000 from him for a motorcycle. He'll loan her this money at 12% for 3 years. 12% slash A is per annum. And that means per year. By Canadian law, we have to give interest rates as a yearly rate so you can compare just a little bit more easily. And in this case, Uncle Louis is obeying the law. If in 3 years she pays him $32,000, will she get her legs broken? Let's figure out how much interest Courtney owes Uncle Louis. She borrowed $24,000 at 12% for 3 years. So the interest that she owes him is $8,640. The total that she owes him is the $24,000 loan plus $8,640 interest. It's a total of $32,640. Oh no, Courtney. Her legs get broken. I have 2 different types of questions for you. I have a handout included in your booklet, and I will post the answers to those up on the front board. Also out of your textbook, page 481, it will be a really good idea while you do financial questions to use different sources for your questions where the wording is just a little bit different in financial matters.